Hi, I'm Steve.
And I'm Sandy, and we're two tenderfoot tourists. Welcome to episode 74, the one about marvelous Massachusetts.
One of the things that you and I have talked about in the past is going to Massachusetts, and specifically to Boston.
We've been really excited about the thought of going to Boston because we are freaks about history. We love history.
Totally love the history aspect of that particular part of our nation. And we're going to save Boston for another episode because there is so much. Make a long story short, this episode is going to cover a lot of areas of interesting things to see, to visit. We throw in a little history, but it's kind of odd history and interesting history that most people don't think about. If you are planning on using Boston as a hub to see all these different things that we're mentioning in this podcast, highly recommend a Charlie card and a Boston City Pass. Okay, those right there are probably the best and the quickest and most affordable way to actually go around and see a lot of things in the Boston area. And
the Charlie card, is it just kind of like a transportation pass?
Yes. And you can have it for 1 day, a week, a month.
That's
whatever.
pretty cool.
It is pretty cool. And it's very affordable. So anyway, if you plan on doing that, this is a good way of starting off right. So with that being said, what is the first thing we have on our list of weird or bizarre or interesting or magnificent?
See, it's episodes like this that I wish they could see our face, because as soon as you started saying, what is it we have on our list first, did you see my face? I got the smirk.
Yeah.
It's like
I saw that.
They're going to think this is so weird.
They probably have seen it if they've ever watched or went to a Ripley's Believe It or Not museum.
Very possibly. And definitely I remember hearing about this over the years, but never really knew much about it. And that is the skull of Phineas Gage and the rod that had passed through it. Something very unique about that. I mean, I'm sure people have had stuff, plummet through their heads, and that's sick, I know, but I'm sure it's happened before. But this man lived.
This man lived, and I'm sure that this man had a 43-inch long rod that had blown through it. I think, was he working on the railroad? I don't remember what it was.
He was a foreman on the railroad.
He was a foreman on the railroad, and an accident happened, and okay, so tell everybody what the misconception is about the actual rod.
In the article I was reading, it was talking about the fact that they were trying to give impersonators a heads up. Because I guess when people are touring around that area, people like to dress up like him. And they'll walk around looking like they have a rod through their head.
Right.
Well, that is historically inaccurate because it blew through his head. It came out the other side, landed approximately 30 feet away. So he did not walk around with a rod in his head.
But you know what's so funny? Even Ripley in the museum has him with the rod through the skull, don't they? And drawn in pictures and stuff.
I don't know. I don't know if it's the same guy or not. You need to look that up before you say it's in there.
Maybe I should. This head is the skull. Which also does the skull in the museum that I'm going to mention has the rod going through it, doesn't it?
No,
it doesn't.
No, the skull and the rod both are at the museum.
Okay, but they're separated. And
correct.
Okay, so it's at the Warren Anatomical Museum, which also houses 15,000 other specimens and artifacts, and it's also free to visitors.
And it's at a medical school, right?
Right, exactly.
That's so cool. Do you want to know how it happened?
How?
This is kind of interesting.
How did it happen?
He had the rod in his hand.
Oh,
and he was pounding it.
Mm-hmm.
As they put it, carelessly pounding it. He did not realize what was beneath him, and it was explosives. And it exploded, and it slammed it up through his skull.
Yeah, the way I remember you telling me when it blew, and it went through his skull, passed through, and it came out the top and landed like
30 feet away.
30 feet away.
And they said that it was amazing because he never lost consciousness. Poor guy. I think he probably would have been better off in a way to have lost consciousness for a while, although he might have died if he did. But they said he never lost consciousness, and he didn't have any major physical damage
other than
he lost an eye.
Yeah.
And they did say, however, that his personality changed completely, where he had been very responsible and a foreman. He had become a little more, what was the word they used?
Grumpy? Was that the word?
Oh, no, it wasn't grumpy. They said that he was now increasingly erratic, irritable, and profane.
Gotcha.
And said later, said Gage lived for a dozen subsequent cuss-filled years. Cuss-filled years.
Cuss-filled years.
Gage lived for a dozen subsequent cuss-filled years.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, okay, so that is also, I'll repeat, is in the Warren Anatomical Museum. It's a medical museum, like Sandy said. And
aren't there other?
There's some other oddities, if you will, that are there that you can see, but it's not just about the. I mean, after all, it says 15,000 specimens.
Right. So I mean,
it's a medical science museum.
This oddity might bring you there, but you might look around. It would be pretty interesting. We looked at a few pictures, and like one of them was the skeletons of conjoined twins.
Yeah.
And, I mean, that's just a strange thing to see. I mean, you can't help it. You're intrigued.
Exactly. So what's the next on our list of Massachusetts?
The Skinny House.
Ah, the Skinny House, the Spite House.
I started to say it has a nickname.
Yeah, that's at 44 Hull Street in the north end of Boston.
All right. The Skinny House is also in Boston, Massachusetts. And it's also called the Spite House, as you said, because they were trying to anger their neighbors when they built it. Now, there's different stories as to how that happened. The one I am going to tell you is the one I prefer because it kind of makes sense to me. But supposedly, a couple of brothers inherited some land from their deceased father. And while one brother was away serving in the military, the other built a large home, leaving the soldier only a shred of property that he had felt certain was too tiny to build on. So he was very upset about this, right? When he returned and he found his inheritance was tiny and his brother had this big, nice house. So he built this narrow house, tall house, I should say, to block the sunlight from coming in the windows of that side of his brother's house.
That was hilarious.
I think that's pretty funny. But I guess it is, I believe, 5 stories tall.
Is it 5 stories? Wow.
I'm looking to make sure I'm right on that. But I believe so. It's 5 stories tall. It's at the biggest, I think, 10 foot wide, but that's on the outside. And inside, I think the narrowest was about 6 foot.
Oh my goodness.
So they said an adult could reach from one side to the other, touching it. And let's see. Yeah. They don't really have very many doors in the house because everything is separated by floors. So they don't need doors in the house.
That's funny.
There is actually a couple that live there, and they talked about the fact that they tried to have a New Year's party, and they only had 10 people. And people, in order just to let somebody go to the bathroom, they had to move from room to room.
Oh my!
To
so
let
they
people
had to
go to the
shuffle
bathroom
through, and
so it was a crazy mess. And they said that they've had people just walk into their backyard and sit down at their picnic table. And when they ask them what they're doing, they say, "We'll just be a couple minutes. We're just taking a couple pictures." It's like, this is my house. I live here.
Okay, we have said in the past that, remember our Hollywood, our filming locations, vacations? Right. We talked about how you need to have some respect for some people's property because some of these locations are actually people living there.
Right,
that's
or their
personal property.
Or their place of business.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. Remind yourself, please, guys. Be respectful of their personal space.
But that's an oddity, though.
It's one thing to walk up to their door, knock on their door, and say, if you don't care, I'd like to take a photo of your house, but if you'd rather or not, I just thought I should ask.
Legally speaking, you can stand from the sidewalk because that's public property.
Right.
And you can take a picture of the home. Yeah, there's nothing wrong with that. They can't tell you don't do that.
It's just a little bizarre and creepy to walk in and sit down at somebody's picnic table.
Yeah, I agree.
Anyway.
Yeah, it's someone's private property. So, but that is something, the Skinny House is something to see in Boston.
In Boston. And, I mean, it is historic, sorta. It's just not a big old famous one, but now we've made it famous.
Now, the next one is kind of really historic and bizarre, and I really like it. And one of the things that I want to do when we do take a trip to Boston is due to the Freedom Trail, which ends with the USS Constitution. And what is so significant about the USS Constitution that we're bringing to this podcast is the sawed-off head of Andrew Jackson. The sailing ship is also a museum. The USS Constitution is an actual clipper ship. In fact, it's also known as the Old Ironsides of the United States Navy, named by President George Washington himself after the United States Constitution. It is the world's oldest commissioned naval vessel still afloat. Isn't that kind of interesting?
I think that is super cool.
That is really super cool. The fun fact about this particular vessel and museum is that Paul Revere had a hand in building it by making some of the bolts that fastens the timbers and together. He actually created. He made some of the parts.
He crafted them.
Thank you. He crafted some of the things. But back to the sawed-off head of Andrew Jackson, which actually is inside the museum of the ship. It's fascinating. Okay,
it sounds really cryptic, but it's not as bad as people think.
So, the U.S. Constitution Museum is located in the Charlestown Navy Yard. Due to a decision to veto, President Andrew Jackson had made vetoing a bill that would benefit local businesses, he gained some unfavorability. Originally, he was known as a war hero. That's the way they viewed Andrew Jackson.
So long story short, suddenly he doesn't have so many fans.
He doesn't have very many fans right now. And so this bill that he vetoed was going to harm certain business owners at that time. And a certain captain by the name of Samuel W. Dewey, who was very angry with Andrew Jackson at that time because the USS Constitution was in dry dock at the time and they were putting his face on the front end of the ship of the USS Constitution. And they already had it carved out of wood and they were putting it on there, and Andrew Jackson and his vice president wanted to be down there for the unveiling.
Yeah. Probably the christening of the ship, if that,
Yeah. And so, it was already built.
Yeah,
it was added on there.
Right.
And he was not very happy. And so they had that thing on guard. Right. And so this certain sea captain decided that he was going to sneak up on there on July 2nd of 1834 in the midst of a thunderstorm at that time, sawed it off.
Well, and he didn't just saw the whole head either. He took it right from the nose on up.
Yeah, and then at some point, I don't know if he sawed the mouth off or it just fell off because he cut off that portion above it or something like that. But you can actually find that piece in the Museum of the USS Constitution still. So you can go visit that, which I think is like a very fascinating thing. But by the way, it is free to get on board. However, they do ask that you make donations, and they have suggested amounts for those donations. And for adults are looking at $10 to $15, for children 5 to 10, and for families 25 to 45. But they say that any amount is actually appreciated. So that is something fascinating and marvelous.
I would totally pay. I would totally pay to go see that.
Well, if you go online and you look at some of the pictures of the USS Constitution, I mean, that is a gorgeous ship. I mean, it is beautiful. So there's that. The next thing that we have, and if we're going to stay on that topic of warships, we can talk about
you and your ships, right?
I know, right? Well, you like them too.
I know. I love the USS Alabama, but that's a whole new state.
That is a new state. So stay on that topic of battleships
and
stuff like that. We have one of the largest collection of battleships in one area in Fall River. This place is really fascinating. Go online and look at this place. It's Battleship Cove. It was established in the 1960s or something like that. And they have several different World War II memorabilia there as far as battleships go.
I'm really excited about the possibility of going there someday because, I mean, I got thrilled with the one battleship and the submarine at Mobile. Mm-hmm. And to think about multiples.
Yeah, I know,
think
right?
It would take my breath away.
They have the USS Massachusetts battleship there, believe it or not. I know that comes as a shock. They also have the USS Joseph P. Kennedy Jr. destroyer is also there. The USS Lionfish submarine.
Cool.
They also have one of the largest collection of PT boats there. They have a total of 2 plus other things about other PT boats there. And this really shocked me. They have this thing called the Hidden Sea, and it's a Soviet ship.
Called the what?
Hidden Sea. HIDDENSEE. Hidden Sea.
Interesting.
It's actually one of the newer ships. Actually, it's newer than anything. It was commissioned in the 1980s or something like that. I can't remember. But it was decommissioned in 96, and it actually found its way over in this Battleship Cove. And it looks really, really cool. And it's built by the Soviets, an actual Soviet ship.
See, I'm totally intrigued. I can't help it. I want to see it so bad.
I know, right? Okay, so admission to Battleship Cove is $25 a person. Now, I know we paid $14 or $15 at the Mobile
Right. And there was a lot to see there because there was the battleship, there was the submarine, there was the building full of airplanes.
And outside on the yard, there was a lot of like tanks and
airplanes
bombers and fighter jets.
Wasn't there a U-boat?
There was a U-boat.
So, I mean, there was a lot to see.
There's a lot. So $15 is really worth it. But this one, you have
more ships
to go walking around on. And I think $25 I think is really reasonable now. If you're an active military with ID, you get $16. Seniors $23. Children are $15 between 4 and 12. And children who are under 3 are free. U.S. military veterans with ID is $16 as well. So, I mean, I think I'd really like to go see this.
To introduce a little levity to the podcast, we again bring to you words of wisdom from You Know You've Reached Middle Age if
you've stopped worrying about hair loss and started worrying about memory loss.
Ouch, I'm there.
Done there.
Of course, I got a lot of hair. I don't ever worry about hair loss.
No. Hair loss.
Baldy.
Yes.
Two Tenderfoot Tourist Podcast is sponsored by Insurers of America.
Insurers of America is committed to being at the forefront of technology and providing the best possible customer experience in the insurance industry. Regardless of how big, small, unique, or specific your insurance needs, Insurers of America has a policy for you and tops it all off with exceptional personalized care. They enjoy giving you the peace of mind that comes with knowing your insurance agency can help you. Become a part of a family at Insurers of America today.
Anyway, so what else do we have, Sandy?
Well, if you're really into the weird and creepy, then you could go stay at Lizzie Borden's bed and breakfast.
No, thank you. No, sign me up on that one.
Oh, it's pretty interesting. Okay, first of all, if you can get past the fact that people were murdered in this house, it is absolutely gorgeous, okay?
I know that's okay. The whole intended purpose is you're you're staying in a home where a person got murdered. You can't really separate the two.
You can't.
You can't separate
That's why I'm laughing. But it's really, okay, I totally find it intriguing, and I know that's messed up. Okay. I don't want to stay there, though.
No,
so there's a
difference.
No. The whole thing, it happened in 1892. We won't get into the whole story because it's too big. But long story short, she was accused of killing her parents, and she was acquitted. They were brutally killed.
Yeah, with an axe.
Supposedly.
Oh.
But according to what I read, there was no blood found on the axe head. So there are people that don't believe that was the weapon.
Okay.
So anyway, this is the house where they were killed. And I'm intrigued by the fact that they tried to keep with the time. But I was looking at these things and they are making a good amount of money if people are staying there because they're making, excuse me, for double occupancy, they're making $250 a night to $275 a night for
I can't
each
believe
room.
People pay that much.
And they said they can fit one more person in there if necessary for another extra $100 a night.
Just 100?
Is that incredible?
That is crazy.
And they have several rooms because you could stay in the one
per night.
Uh-huh.
Oh boy.
You could stay in the one where the mother was found, killed. You could stay in Lizzie's and her sister's room. You could stay, there's all these different rooms you could stay in. I personally, like I said, I couldn't stay there. It would be too awkward. But
seriously,
if you just toured it as a beautiful old home, it's incredible. Some of these tall headboards and stuff. It's just beautiful. But anyway, creepy.
Very creepy.
And then you can also go. This one is creepier, but at least you
this is also
there.
in Fall River, right?
Yes. I'm sorry, I didn't tell you where it was located. Yeah, Fall River, Massachusetts.
Right, not too far away from the battleship. I'm thinking, like a matter of 30 minutes, I think, or 20 minutes. I think.
Couldn't tell you.
I think that's what I found on the map.
I'm glad you found it because you know me in maps again. But there is actually a place, I'm going to see if I can say it right. It's the Lizzie Borden Murderabilia.
That's a mouthful.
Yeah, so it's like memorabilia, but it's murderabilia.
Murderabilia.
And it is a mansion that they are using now as a museum for the artifacts, as they say, from the murder. The uniqueness of this, of course, they have the axe head there.
The supposed axe head.
Well, the axe head that she was accused of using.
Oh, okay.
But, you know, they have other things there, like, I know this is so gross, but they have like some hair from the parents' heads.
Oh, are you serious?
Oh yeah, and pictures of the skulls after they were hit.
Yeah, no,
I'm thinking it's just the skulls later on,
Yeah.
But I'm like, I don't want to see that. That's gross. But the fun fact is, it's in the home of this
you
high
told me about
society woman.
Yeah.
That back in the time that Lizzie lived, after she was acquitted, she lived a pretty quiet life, and she, however, did try to make it into high society. And the way the woman answered her wanting to be a part of that, because she was in high society, was not in this house. And now they're displaying Lizzie Borden's memorabilia in her house. Yeah, murderabilia in her house.
Wow.
So that woman would be turning over in her grave.
Yeah, she would be.
But if you like the creepy and the mysterious, you might like going to tour that.
In fact, that high society woman, you just wrap her in copper, and when she's in the coffin, she could generate enough power.
You think?
Yeah, for like half the country, I'm sure.
She's spinning. She's a blur.
She's a blur.
They walk over her grave, they can hear whirring. Smoke.
Okay, so that's not all of your Lizzie Borden, is it?
Actually, it is almost all of it. They actually can go tour her grave also.
Gotcha.
And see where her parents are buried. And it's just weird.
It's just weird.
I don't know that. It's not my thing, but I do like the house. It's a pretty house.
Well, it's like a Victorian style, isn't it?
Yeah, my problem is I watch too much Fixer Upper, so I know what I'm looking at, and that's pretty.
That's gorgeous. I love that show.
I know.
All right, we just now discovered it.
Yeah, and now we've been binging it. We have a problem.
Yeah, we have a real big
That's
problem.
one of our future trips. I don't care how we do it. We're going to go down.
We have to go to Magnolia Farms.
Where's that, Waco?
Yep.
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 We're going.
Yeah, it's not very far away.
We will come see you, Chip and Joanna.
Like they're really listening.
Run, hide. Warn your friends.
Warn your friends.
The Tenderfoot tourists are coming to Texas.
They got a state of emergency in Texas just for us.
They should. Well,
Or my phone.
In Springfield, Massachusetts.
What? There's a Springfield, Massachusetts?
Right? In Springfield, Massachusetts, we have Dr. Seuss' Amazing World and Sculpture Garden. And it's free to go in the garden.
Yes.
Which is very cool right there.
Yeah. Okay. One ticket for five museums, which includes the Amazing World of Dr. Seuss, and several art museums and a science museum and,
right. It's not just the Dr. Seuss stuff.
Right. It's like $25 for a person and like $13 for a child. But the garden outside of the museum is actually, I believe, free.
Right. And with it being Dr. Seuss, you probably have a lot of small children that would think it was neat, and 3 and under is free. So that's kind of cool.
Now, what makes this, not only does this garden itself is like so special, and it's special in so many different ways. For instance, who has not stopped as a child and read or watched a cartoon that was based on a Dr. Seuss book? Am I right?
Right. I mean,
Right.
my favorite is Fox. Oh yeah, you got The Grinch That Stole Christmas, which I love.
Yeah. And then Horton Hears a Who, the Lorax.
And I love reading Fox and Socks.
There you go.
Because I like tongue twisters.
The list goes on and on to the amount of books and how much that his books had connected with parents and children alike.
And helped a lot of little children learn to read.
Well, his stepdaughter was also responsible for actually creating the statues that were in this.
Right. She sculpted she sculpted them. I can't talk.
Okay, so I'm just going to go to the website that talks about the Springfield Museum, the Dr. Seuss National Memorial Sculpture Garden. Opened in 2002, the Dr. Seuss National Memorial Sculpture Garden was first envisioned with Ted Giesel. Is that how you pronounce the name right there?
I'd probably say Geisel.
Geisel?
But I don't know.
I apologize if I got that wrong. Visited Springfield in 1986, which, by the way, I learned, as it turns out, that this is the birth home of Dr. Seuss, is Springfield, Massachusetts.
That's so cool.
But his wife, after his death in 91, authorized the creation of the National Museum and provided major support for the project. In 1996, Ted's stepdaughter, noted day sculptor Lark Gray Diamond Cates, was selected to make over 30 bronze statues for the museum grounds.
So many of the millions of people who visited the sculpture garden asked about a Dr. Seuss museum that the Springfield Museums knew it had to find a way to create the much requested tribute to Springfield's native son.
There you go. Thank you for reading that.
Long story short, they heard so many requests to have something for him that they knew that they had to do it. They had to put something out there.
Well, they didn't have a choice, right? So make a long story short, believe the garden itself is free.
Yes, the garden is free.
But if you want to experience the museum and everything else with it, it's $25 for adults and $13 for children. Ages
3 and under free.
Yeah. So anyway, and if you're in a residence there, it is free with proof of address.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, not bad, right?
Hey, if you're in Massachusetts, if you folks live in Massachusetts, take advantage.
Yeah, that's right. And send us some photos of that garden. I would love to see it.
I know. And the museum, if they let you. I don't know how that works.
I don't know how that works either.
Because we couldn't find any online at the time that we were looking.
That is something worthy of viewing. I mean,
yeah,
I can't say enough about Dr. Seuss and the stories he wrote.
I'm pretty sure it could make us all feel like kids again.
Totally.
Anywho.
Okay, so make a long story short, we could not fit everything that we found in this podcast.
No, as a matter of fact, I still feel like we even rushed the things we did talk about because we had to squeeze so much in. So we also want to give a few honorable mentions. For instance, if you grew up in the 80s, you might be interested in visiting.
We totally are. Cheers.
Right. And the funny thing is, if you want to see the inside and the outside, you have to go to 2 different locations.
Now, that is kind of the fascinating thing. If you want to see the exterior, you have to go to 84 Beacon Street, Boston, Massachusetts. Okay. Okay. The opening shot was always that at 84 Beacon Street. Then they actually built a replica of the interior at another location on one, I cannot pronounce this, Fenwell Hall.
Let me see.
Right there.
Oh my. We won't try. Look it up.
Okay, so make a long story short, in order to have a gift shop and they have a restaurant and they have a bar all there, the thing about this place also is it's over near the Freedom Trail, which you and I need to do sometime, is that Freedom Trail, which
absolutely,
which we'll go into a separate podcast about that particular thing. I'd like to actually do the podcast after we get done doing it, but so that is an option for you to go and visit something nostalgic. The Cheers bar.
Right, and you could go to both or just decide which one do you want more, your picture with the sign or your picture in there where everybody could be going, Norm!
Okay, so they could probably do both because it's within minutes of walking distance of both.
Did you say like 30 minutes? Is that what you told me?
Like 30 minutes.
I couldn't remember for sure.
Yeah, it says 26 minutes on the
we're fat, so
Google.
it'll probably take us 30.
It'll take us an hour. I have to stop and take a breath, get a soda. Okay, and then another one of honorable mention is
still in Boston, the giant baby heads.
You can find you can find this at the Museum of Fine Arts. It's it's free. It's on the exterior. These things are huge, and they just recently.
Did you tell me they were 8 foot tall?
They're 8 foot tall. They're made of bronze, and they're 1.6 tons.
And long story short, we said long story short again, they are sculpted baby heads.
Baby heads.
No necks, just the heads. No bodies, just the heads.
Creepy. And it's free, so that's something to have your picture taken by. Then, of course, now we've mentioned this once before, the molasses flood of 1919.
Right, and you can in Boston, you can go see a plaque that is dedicated to that and the loss of 21 lives, I believe.
21 lives, and it was 2 million gallons of molasses that just flooded the streets there.
I can't even imagine. And I mean, it destroyed things.
I know, right? I mean, it's just insane. It injured more than 100 other people, and of course that included horses.
Yeah, it's so weird. And, we laugh, but to think something just take things down that way, it's really scary.
History Channel did an entire episode of just that.
And you were sucked in.
I was absolutely sucked in. I was sticky.
I should say you stuck to it all the way through, didn't you?
I stuck through it. That's it.
Okay, so I found another weird thing. In Florida, Massachusetts, there is a grave with a tombstone marker that is an actual expired parking meter. And the one thing they say next to it is, no, it does not help to put coins in it. It's not going to change. Give them more time.
I think that's hilarious. Someone in death had a really good sense of humor.
Yeah.
It's the grave of Gordy Burdick. 2003 is whenever his meter ran out.
And then his wife died a few years later, and they buried her there too.
Yeah. So anyway, there's something to just walk by and take a picture with,
That's crazy.
Does that seem a little odd to go on a tour and it's like, you know what? I want to
Let's go see gravestones. Let's go see weird graves. You know what? I could totally see us doing that. I could totally see that.
I
just
say it out loud.
Yeah, we would do something like that.
Yeah.
So. Hey, as long as I don't have to actually see the dead people, I'm fine.
Exactly. And then we have two final honorable mentions. We kept the Gravity Hill and the Bad Art Museum, right?
There's three things. But
okay. What is the third one? What was that?
Let's just talk about Gravity Hill.
Okay.
Well, Gravity Hill, supposedly, I always have to say that because if I haven't been there, I don't know.
Supposedly.
But there is a spot that you pull up to, and you have to do it just right. So you may have to try a couple times, but you pull up, you put your vehicle in neutral, and your vehicle rolls up the hill backwards.
Yes.
I want to do it.
Yes. There's all those kinds of weird things all over through the U.S. I mean, there's those, it's just, I don't know if
the mystery spot.
Yes,
all those.
The mystery
There's
spot,
a lot of mystery spots, by the way.
But this is just
Google
one
it.
more. Yes. We covered that in Bizarre, California. It was a mystery spot.
And then there is what you were talking about, the Summersville Museum of Bad Art.
Right. Yes. And it's bad art.
It is. We haven't been there, but we looked online at a few pictures. We're going, yeah, that's pretty bad. That's pretty bad.
That's pretty bad. Some of it you may be offended by going in there, just a FYI.
Be prepared. It can be bad in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
So anyway, if you're intrigued, go take a looky.
Yeah.
You might be in
you know
entertained.
What? It'll make your own artwork look really good.
Yes. Yes. It will make you feel very talented. Steve is very talented, but it makes me feel very talented. Okay.
So cute.
So we aren't really going to dig into this one, but I mean, if you hear about Massachusetts, the only other thing you think about off the top of your head besides Boston is Salem.
Ah, yes.
So if you want to learn a little something more about the Salem witch trials or the paranormal, you go to Salem. We are not getting into that. That's going to be a whole episode of its own, probably around Halloween.
Probably.
Because there's tons of stuff about the Salem witch trial. But there is also Spellbound tours.
Right.
They take you around a museum that they have there. They take you on vampire and ghost hunting tours. Yeah, that sounds interesting.
It does, right?
It really does. And so I think we have definitely covered the weird and the interesting today.
I agree. But once we do an episode on Boston itself, I think that is going to really blow everybody's mind, especially if there's someone who has never been to Boston. I know
agree.
that just the research that we had done just from trying to figure out what we're going to talk about in this particular episode just absolutely blew our minds.
Well, and all we did was touch base.
And that's all we did.
That is crazy. And we say this with every state we're tackling. Missouri about made our minds blow because we lived here and didn't know half of that stuff existed.
No, exactly.
But I mean, guys, look in your own state.
I know.
You can get a cheap vacation.
One of the good resources that we've found is onlyinyourstate.com. Go check that place out.
Absolutely. Very cool.
Not all of the things that you have on there are going to be 100% legit because of the fact that it is the opinion of someone who's writing that article. But with a little research and a little elbow grease, you can actually find some really nice things for you to visit. And I think that's true for also Massachusetts.
Agreed.
The funny thing about Massachusetts is there was a lot of things that we had found that is no longer there or available. For instance, like what was that in Saugus, yeah. Saugus, Massachusetts. They had the steakhouse, Hilltop Steakhouse.
Right, and there used to be a big sign that was a giant cactus, and then they had a herd of cattle, plastic cattle.
Mm-hmm.
And they were famous for people trying to steal their cattle, or as they put, kidnap their cattle.
And
I guess at one point, some
Cattle
MIT
rushers, come back here.
some MIT students actually stole one and put one up on the top of was it the chapel or something? I can't remember.
I can't remember anyway.
But anyway, up on one of the buildings at MIT. So it's in the museum at MIT now.
Yes.
But we found so many cool things that disappeared, and don't miss it. Go see it before it goes away,
Yeah,
guys.
well said, Sandy. Well said. So, you know what? This was a great episode, wasn't it? Thank you so much for listening to episode number 74.
The one about Marvelous. Oh my goodness. The one about Marvelous, Massachusetts.
You cracked me up right there. Got me the tickles. It caught me off guard.
It was the oh my goodness, wasn't it?
Oh my goodness. All right.
Two Tenderfoot
All right,
Tourists is a
stop it.
weekly family.
Hold on. Two Tenderfoot Tourists is a weekly family-friendly podcast. If you like Two Tenderfoot Tourists podcast, be sure to subscribe on Apple, Google Play, Stitcher, and Spotify. To get in touch with us and chat about our podcast or even your experiences, simply email us at tenderfoottourist@gmail.com or find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.
You're so messed up. Do you want to try that again?
Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.
I love you. I'm Steve.
And I'm Sandy.
Until next time.
Stay tender.
Check that.